Give me the next several minutes and I'm going to show you exactly how to improve your workplace communication. I have studied communication for decades, everything from communication styles, communication techniques to psychology and NLP, and even improvisational theater. I have lectured to people around the world, tens of thousands of people in various industries, such as legal, medical, and governmental. And I hear the same complaint over and over again. Our communication is breaking down. Now, it's not like anybody's doing a bad job. They're just speaking different languages. And in this video, I'm going to explain why these communication breakdowns happen, the tools and techniques and tips that you can use to up your communication game, and ways that you can communicate anything to anyone, no matter how hard the communication is. So sit back and relax. This is not going to be one of those boring blah, blah, blah kind of lectures. If you've ever seen me speak, you know that is not the way I do this. We're going to have some fun. The real problem is not that people are rude or they're not listening to you. The problem is that we are speaking different languages and we have different styles and different ways of communicating. And when those styles and those ways collide, people are not being heard. I'll give you an example. I do a lot of traveling for speaking, and I was heading off to a trip. My husband was coming with me. I was on the aisle seat in the airplane. He was in the middle because he can sleep anywhere. And there was a woman on the window. And we both sat down and we got everything put together. And the woman turns to us and said, "Excuse me, would either of you like to sit by the window?" And we both said no, because we didn't want to sit by the window. We picked our seats very specifically. So we turned to her and said, "Oh, no, thank you. We're good where we are." She goes, "Okay." Well, the flight goes on, and we had a delay. So we're about a half an hour or 40 minutes behind schedule. And come to find out near the end of the flight, it wasn't that she just wanted us to sit by the window. She had a very fast connection, wanted to sit on the aisle so that she could get out quicker and make her flight. That is not what she communicated to us. She did this very passive, very indirect way of communicating. Would you guys like to switch seats? Not saying, "Hey, would you mind changing seats near the end of the flight because I have a really quick turnaround." We both would have absolutely said, "Yes, we will completely switch seats with you." But that is not what she asked. She did not get her needs met. She did not communicate to us exactly what she wanted to say. She very passively said this. Now let's fast forward. She gets on the ground. She gets to the person who picks her up from the airport and she goes, "These jerks, they wouldn't switch seats with me so that I could get off the plane early." Woo! That's her perception of this experience, right? That we were wrong by not switching seats with her. The sooner you realize that we all have different styles and that we all have different ways of communicating, the sooner communication is going to come easier to you. We can adapt and learn how we communicate. So I'm going to show you the reasons we fail right now and how we can communicate better. So the first mistake that we make is we assume everybody communicates the same way we do. I mean, why would we not assume that, right? This is the reality that we're coming from. But honestly, everybody needs a different way of communication. And the sooner we can figure that out, and the sooner we can adapt our communication to the people we're communicating with, the better off we're going to be. And our communication is going to land better and we're going to get our message across. For example, some people are big picture people and others want the small details. If you're a big picture person, and the small detail person is telling you every minute step of how this is going to go, it's going to drive you crazy. And on the contrary, if you're the micro, I want every detail, and the person goes, "Blah, we're going to do this," you want details. It makes you more comfortable. We learned communication styles in childhood, but that doesn't mean we can't change. For example, when I was a kid, I was a young kid, I was an only child living in Pittsburgh, and my dad was doing something in the house, fixing something. And he said, "Hey, Kath, can you go downstairs, go to the left of the furnace at about hip level, there's a knob. Can you turn it to the right and turn it off?" And I went, "Okay." So I go downstairs, I go to the furnace, there's a bunch of knobs, and I go, "Oh, hip level, okay." And I turn the one at hip level to the right. I go upstairs. He says, "Did you do it?" I said, "Well, yeah." He goes, "No, but did you turn it to the right? You needed to turn it on." And I went, "Right, I did." Well, come to find out, his hip level was a lot different than my 6-year-old hip level. And so I actually completely emptied the entire water heater into our basement. And I didn't get in trouble, but my father realized that what he thought was really specific communication wasn't, because I was coming from a different place. I was coming from a completely different reality. And he walked me down, saw what I had done, and how could he be mad, right? He said hip level. He thought he was being specific, but I was coming from a completely different perspective. I was coming from a place that I thought my reality was right. This is what everybody thinks. We all think that we're coming from the place where we're right. And if only we could could change everybody else, right? Oh, if we could just make them communicate better, everything would be great. But I'll tell you right now, it doesn't work that way. We cannot change anybody else. We can only change and improve ourselves. And I assume that's why you're watching this, because you want tips of ways that you can improve. And the second reason that we so often run into communication issues is our energy. Now, I tend to be very high energy. I'm a very direct communicator. I'm an extrovert. And so when I go at people who are maybe not extroverts, I have to tone it down a little bit. So if I see someone like in a meeting or with me at a talk or in a personal exchange, and I realize they're a little softer in their gestures, they're not as loud, they're not as boisterous, they use fewer words, they tend to contemplate things in between what I'm saying, I'm going to tone it down. I don't want to go at them with full extrovert energy. I'm going to scare the crap out of them. They're going to be like, force field, force field. They are not going to be interested in what I'm saying. They're going to shut down immediately and my message is not getting heard. Now, neither of this is right or wrong, and we all tend to be a combination of both extroverts and introverts. We can switch. We can change a little bit. I had an experience where I was at the post office. I was standing in line to go to the door to pick up a package. There was a bunch of people, and I was standing next to the postage machine, the automatic postage machine. And this woman comes in, and she seems very quiet, and she seems very kind of shy, and she's wearing a football shirt. I'm a huge Steeler fan. I grew up in Pittsburgh. Go Steelers. I love the NFL. It's fun for me. She's approaching with a sweatshirt of the one team that I don't like, and I don't want to embarrass any of you, so it rhymes with Patriots. So the Patriots happen to have won, this was years ago, like however many Super Bowls in a row. And as she approaches me, she says, "Excuse me, are you waiting for the postage machine?" And I said, "Oh, no. We're all standing in line for this door." And she goes, "Oh, okay, thank you." And I looked at her and I thought, I'm going to be funny. And so I say, "Oh, wow, well, had I seen your sweatshirt, I probably would have blocked away." And she goes, "Oh, I'm sorry." Oh no, I felt terrible. And I went, "Oh, no. I said, are you a fan?" And she goes, "Yeah." And I said, "Did you grow up in New England?" And she goes, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, you guys just won like your 500th Super Bowl. I said, you should be proud of that." And she goes, "I'm sorry. I felt horrible. I scared the crap out of this woman." Now, I'm probably never going to see her again, but I can imagine she is not speaking up in meetings and really getting her message across. She is not advocating for herself. If she found a way to extrovert just 20% more somewhere that we can meet in the middle so that we can all be heard. I have sat in so many all hands meetings where, and this is typically the guys, no offense to you guys, but you tend to be really direct, more extroverted communicators. You know, the guys are shouting over each other and they're going over things and they're creating plans. And I look over and there's a woman in the back going, could you, what I would be, what I, and then suddenly the meeting's over. So here's one suggestion. If you are the extrovert, if you're the direct communicator, calm it down a little bit, step back and let those people who don't often speak in meetings say something. They often have so many incredible things to share, but they are afraid to. They don't feel like they have the floor and the command of that room to speak up. It's a beautiful time to say to them, "Hey, we haven't heard from you in a while, Beth. What would you like to say?" Or, "Does anybody else have any ideas that we've not heard from yet?" If you don't want to call them out in public, because that can be scary for an introvert, take them aside after the meeting and say, "Hey, we know you have some really good ideas. We would love to hear more from you. Would you be comfortable speaking up in the next meeting?" And maybe they say yes, and maybe they say no. And if you're the introvert, take a deep breath and find a way to advocate for yourself. Find a way to raise your hand in that meeting and say, "Excuse me, I have something to say." 20% can help shape that difference so that you have the ability to be heard and get your message across, because you have great things to say and you deserve to have that acknowledged. By the way, if you're watching this and you're thinking, wow, my team could really use all this information, go ahead and click the link in the description below. It'll take you right to my website where you can book a discovery call with me. I have done workshops over 350 times worldwide on 5 continents and 2 TEDx talks. I've done presentations for organizations such as Merck, Raytheon, and the United States Postal Service. I give usable tips and tools that people can use in that moment, and they walk away that day with skills that they can take back to the office, back to the house, back to their family, so they can improve leadership, improve relationships, and be a better communicator. So go ahead and click that link, book a call with me, and now back to the video. Mistake number 3 is reacting rather than responding. And we want first responders, right? We don't want first reactors. No one's ever been accused of having a knee-jerk response, and no one ever said, "Bob, calm down. You're really over-responding." It's those reactions that are going to get us in trouble. The reactions that cause us to yell at the guy on the freeway and send an email off that we probably should have slept on. on. This is where stress and communication intersect. Because when we're in a stressed place, it's like we're wearing cloudy glasses. We see everything through this lens of negativity. Our heart races, our jaws clench, our cognitive function goes out the window. We tend to take more dangerous risks when we're stressed. And in a communication situation, that could be life or death, or fired, or still keeping your job. What comes out from that reaction is a sarcastic comment, a passive-aggressive comment, or an email that you probably should have slept on. I'm going to teach you my favorite technique to take that pause and reduce that stress. So if you're in a safe place to do so, this will just take a minute or two. Go ahead and let your eyes close. And I want you to just concentrate on your breathing. Noticing the inhale and the exhale. And you're not trying to change it. You're not trying to slow it down or speed it up. You're just using it as your focal point right now. And on your next inhale, think, I am. And on all of your inhales, think, I am. And on your next exhale, think, at peace. And on all of your exhales, think, at peace. Inhale, I am. Exhale, at peace. And when other thoughts intrude, that's okay. Just dismiss them without judgment. Let them float away like clouds on a summer day. Return to the breath. I am at peace. And you can let your shoulders drop. You can notice if your hands or your feet or your seat are clenched, and let those relax. Let your jaw relax. Remembering the breath and the I am at peace. Beautiful. Go ahead and do one more. Inhale, I am. Exhale at peace, and open your eyes and come back to the room. Congratulations, you just meditated. And for some of you, maybe that's the first time you've ever meditated. For some of you, perhaps that's the first conscious breath you've ever taken. You can do this anytime and any place. I do this before I sat down to record. I do this before I get on stage to speak. I do this before I see coaching or massage clients. Because here's the bottom line. The difference between a response and a reaction, that 2 seconds of breath, that 1 minute of the mini meditation could be the difference between destroying a friendship, a relationship, and your job. I had a client who was starting to feel really uncomfortable at work. She was pretty sure she was going to be fired soon. A lot of people were asking her questions about what her job was, what is the description, what are you really doing for the company? And on a Friday afternoon, the boss said, I want to see you first thing Monday morning. Okay, well, first of all, there goes the weekend, right? Because we're going to be what-ifing that all weekend. She was sure she was getting fired. And so Saturday morning, she woke up and she wrote this email. I've never liked working here and you people are treating me like crap and you don't appreciate what I'm doing. She created this whole tale overnight as to what was happening at this office. Her husband read the letter and said, you know, why don't you wait and see? She took a deep breath and she said, but it felt really good to write this. And he said, I am absolutely sure it felt really good to write it. But I would reread it with fresh eyes and decide if you really want to send this email. So she took a breath, she went for a walk, she played with her dog, she came back in, she took a deep breath and read the email again and realized, wow, she was not only jumping to conclusions, which is a cognitive distortion, she was really overreacting. She was not responding, nor was she responding to anything concrete because she didn't know what was going to happen yet. So the weekend goes, she did not send the email. Thank God, because Monday morning she sits down in the boss's office and he leans over and says, we are so pleased with what you've been doing for this company. I know we don't acknowledge very often exactly how much you work for us, how hard you work for us, how many hats you're wearing. We would like to give you a promotion to put you actually in charge of the department that you're working so hard for. And with that promotion comes a raise and an extra week of vacation. What do you think about that? She burst into tears because holy crap, she almost ruined this entire opportunity. She got reactive instead of responsive. And could you imagine if she sent off that email basically telling her boss to F off? that promotion would have been down the tubes. She would have lost out on an incredible opportunity. He was stunned that she was crying. She, of course, did not tell him about the email. And she said, wow, this is so surprising. I'm so honored. Thank you so much. This could have been a disaster for her if she didn't realize that she needed to respond rather than react. Mistake number 4 is choosing the wrong words. And what I mean by that is saying things like, you should, or you have to, or you'd better, or, these words get very accusatory. We are shoulding all over ourselves all the time. We do this to us as well. I should call my mom. I should clean my room. I should do my taxes. We probably should do all those things. But when we swap out words for I'm going to, or, hey, would you mind? Or have you considered? I was told my entire life I should meditate. You should meditate, you should meditate, you should meditate. That's not a good way to start a sentence, as I'm explaining right now. It makes me feel like I'm doing something wrong, right? It's a very parental sort of, you should. It's this very finger waggy sort of thing, and none of us respond well to that. So if you want to up your communication, the first thing I'm going to say is, let's get rid of the should, you must, you have to. Find different words. Find different ways to request what you would like. The other problem with you should is it sort of ends the conversation there. Often the person shuts down and you don't have the ability to communicate anything else. So can you say things in a different way? And I'm a huge fan of training people how we like to be communicated with. We all have triggers from the past. We all have things that remind us of my coach used to say that, or oh God, my ex used to say that. Can you train people of how you'd like to be spoken to? Not only at work, but in your personal relationships. Say, hey, I loved the message the other day, but if you would have phrased it a different way, that would have landed better for me. My husband and I often say things like, hey, how can I say this in a way that's not going to be triggering for you? Or I could see you were busy. How can I interrupt you and ask something in a way that's not going to destroy your stream of consciousness, their train of thought? Having these open communications about communication is going to make a huge bit of difference in how your message comes across and how you are heard. So saying things like you should, right? How else can you phrase that? How else could you ask that question of somebody rather than making it accusatory or jumping to conclusions? We do this all the time in our communication. And it's important that we are very aware of the words that are coming out of our mouth. It's so funny. I do a lot of radio and TV, and I've had people say, how do you not say all the time? Well, first you have to be aware that you're actually saying How often are you saying should? How often are you saying have to? So your homework for this technique is to pay attention to where you are shoulding all over yourself and the way you're shoulding all over other people. Notice when you are using these triggered words and try to change them. Do everything in your power to be aware of it, note it, maybe even write it down. Put a little hash mark on a piece of paper. I said should 15 times today. And also, how are you talking to yourself? Self-talk is incredibly important in communication, and how we talk to ourselves is a reflection of how we talk to others and how we receive information when other people are talking to us. So there's your homework for this technique. Pay attention to that. The other word that I'm going to encourage you to get out of your vocabulary is but. But negates everything that came before it. I love you, but we should just be friends. Ugh, no one wants to hear that. If you have to use these sort of contrary things, I love you, but change it to and. I love you, and I think we should just be friends. For some reason, it's calmer on our brain, but puts us in a really negative place. It puts us on edge. It makes us feel like we are being almost degraded in a way, right? Your report was really, really great, but most of the facts were wrong. Or if you have to use but, reverse your but. Say the negative thing first and end with something positive. This is one of my favorite communication hacks because our brain hears the last thing we hear. So if you have to say two things, a good thing and a bad thing, start with the bad thing. Man, your report was a mess. I couldn't understand a word of it, but the font was really nice. Poor person with this report, right? So there's your homework for this. Pay attention to the shoulds, pay attention to the buts, see where you can change your communication so that you can reach more people. I guarantee it'll help. Mistake number 5, not thinking on your feet. Now, I have an advantage of this. I have been doing improv since 7th grade. It's the most fun ever. And if you've never taken an improv class, there's probably one in your town. They're all over the place. If you ever watch something like Whose Line Is It Anyway or anything on Dropout TV, improv is still huge right now. Improv trains you to think on your feet. It trains you, and the very first thing is yes and. It trains you to yes and. It trains you to not negate anybody. And it also trains you that there are no wrong answers. Now, in life, there may be bad things we could say or wrong things we can say, but for the most part, there's no wrong answers in improv. If it moves the scene forward, that's the point of the scene. So let me explain to you yes and. I will give you the example that my improv teacher always uses. You're in a scene with somebody. They say, honey, we better get ready. We have to go pick up the kids. They say, we don't have kids. It might be funny for a second, but here's the problem. They just completely blew the scene. They could maybe say, I don't like our kids, leave them at school. That is equally as funny, and it moves the scene along. It is yesing what came before it. If you are in a meeting and somebody says something like, you know what, there's no way we can meet this deadline, rather than getting defensive or negating what they just said, you have to, get curious and yes and that. Okay, well, what can we do to make this deadline more reachable? Or, okay, I hear you. What has to change so that we can meet this deadline? Perhaps they need more hands on it. Perhaps it needs to be pared down. Perhaps it needs to be done in stages. But as soon as you say, no, you have to, and we're going back to the have to should thing, right? You're not making that person feel heard. With the yes and, they are feeling heard. And one of my favorite communication phrases is, did I get that right? Love, did I get that right? Because that means you're listening. So you want me to redo this report, 20 pages or less, all blue font, no pictures, but you do want graphs. Did I get that right? That means that you're listening. This makes the person feel heard. It makes them trust you. It makes you more accessible in those communications to them. Using the yes and is one of those incredible tools that successful people use, whether they realize it or not. It's just part of them. They hear, they respond rather than react, and they move that sentence forward. This is a fun game that you can actually play with friends. Decide you're just going to yes and. We should start a company. Yes. And that company is going to sell shoes for dogs. Yes. And those shoes are going to be replicas of the American Girl dolls. Yes. And we can match them. The shoes for the dogs can match the American Girl doll shoes. Yes. And we should, and just build it, build it, build it, build it. I know it's ridiculous. It gets incredibly silly really fast, but it trains you to do that. Yes. And so take an improv class. Go out and have fun, especially if you have a fear of public speaking, especially if you're afraid to speak up in meetings. Improv is one of those low stakes way to learn to be comfortable in your own skin, to learn to be comfortable as a better communicator, to learn to share your message in a way that lands more positively for people. I had a client who she was negative about everything. She couldn't do that deadline. She couldn't do that project. She didn't like her coworkers. She just sort of was a kind of miserable person. And I explained to her in a coaching session the method of yes and. We did a couple fun exercises. She really had a blast with it. She was going to look into improv in her town. And I said, you complain about people not really treating you well at work. You don't think a lot of people like you. And given how negative she was and such a naysayer, it's no surprise that she was not particularly the favorite person at the office, right? So I said, just for today, try yes and everything. Just try it. 1 time, 5 times, anytime somebody says something, I want you to affirm it and I want you to build on it. And I want to see how different you're going to be treated. She went to work. Somebody said something and her initial reaction was, and she was going to say no, and she caught herself and said yes, and she said it, and they were like, oh, and the conversation continued, and suddenly they were smiling, and suddenly they were laughing, and suddenly this person said, do you want to join us for lunch? She had never been invited for lunch. This shifted people's perception about her. She was no longer the bad guy. She was no longer the enemy. She was the collaborator. She was the one that brought the team together because she learned 2 simple words, yes and. So that's what I have for you today. Let's recap so you can remember exactly what we covered today. The first step was acknowledging and remembering that we all communicate differently. We are not the same, and that can change. We can change ourselves. We can encourage gently other people to change. Ultimately, we're speaking different languages, and we want to come on board and make sure we are augmenting ourselves to make that work. The second thing is energy levels. If you're a huge energy extrovert, tone it down a little bit for those introverts. And if you're an introvert, turn it up just a little bit so we can meet somewhere in the middle. The other thing is responding and reacting. We want first responders, not first reactors. Do your best to offer a response, not a reaction. And by taking that pause, either just that breath or the inhale I am, exhale at peace, you're going to find yourself responding so much more than reacting. And the fourth one was using those wrong words, saying should, have to, must, and but. And the fifth one is thinking on your feet, knowing that you can yes and, that you can think on your feet. And here's the other thing with that, you can always say, I don't know. There's power in saying, I don't know, I will figure that out for you, rather than either fumbling with it or feeling like you don't know. Just acknowledge you don't know. So that's everything I have for you today about communication. There's something I didn't tell you though at the beginning of this video. If you're in a stress state, all of this stuff goes out the window. If you try to incorporate these techniques when you are stressed, they're going to be less effective. And I'm not talking about I had a busy day sort of stress. I'm talking about constant, low grade, sometimes high grade stress that so many of us experience. It's the stress that takes us from a rational, responsive human being into a crazed maniac who's yelling at the guy on the freeway and freaking out because the bacon caught on fire. If you want to learn more about stress, I created an entire video to help you stop stress in its tracks. It teaches you usable tips, tools, and techniques to make sure we get your brain back online so that you can respond instead of react. Because when we're stressed, our amygdala kicks in. That's that lizard part of the brain that tells us we're in fight or flight all the time. That's not what our brain was meant to do. We misread body cues. We see everything through this guise of negativity. We can't read body language properly, and we're not in touch with our own emotions. We tend to be reactive rather than responsive. So if you want to find ways to stop your stress in its tracks, go ahead and click on this video below and I will see you there. And if you want me to come into your organization or company to talk more about communication, if you think these tools can help you, please click the first link in the description. It'll take you straight to my website where you can book a call. Thanks so much for being here. Have a healthy day.